And what mystics of all ages have experienced is a higher realm, which we might call the spiritual realm, where there are vibrations that are beyond anything we have here on earth. There is a sense of peace, there's a sense of beauty. Just look at some of the experiences people have had. For example, near-death experiences, where people have experienced separating themselves from the physical body, going to a higher realm and having various experiences. There are many beautiful descriptions out there. So what I'm saying here is that your mind has a natural built-in ability to tune the dial to both the material frequency spectrum and something beyond. And in order to have a spiritual mystical experience, eventually an experience of God's ultimate being and presence, you simply have to learn to use that ability more consciously. You have to become more conscious of that ability and use it. Now, there is a part of you that is in charge of your mind's ability, that is in charge of attuning your mind either to this world or something beyond. And that's what I would like to call the conscious self. You can call it many other things, but for practical reasons, I like to call it the conscious self because it indicates that this is the part that makes you self-aware. Now, this conscious self is actually an extension of God's own being. Now, there are mystics who have realized that when you attune your consciousness to the level of duality, you sort of go behind almost like a veil of energy that hides reality from you. It hides anything beyond the material world, and therefore it also hides who you are as a spiritual being. And the result is that most people believe in the existence and the reality of this separate self that exists independently of other people. And therefore, you can do whatever you want without, in other words, you can do something to other people without hurting yourself because they're separate from you. If you can get away with it, then it will have no effect on you. Or so the separate self, so the ego believes. But if you look at the spiritual teachers, the Buddha, Jesus, many other spiritual teachers, modern and ancient, they have actually all, between the lines, given a very different message. They have said that all life is interconnected. The idea that we are separate beings is an illusion created by the ego and the state of duality. This is actually something that science has proven as well, where science has proven that all matter even is interconnected, that there is only one fundamental underlying reality that is all one, all connected. So, what I'm saying is that when you go behind this state of separation, you realize that there really is only one being, one consciousness, one greater self. This is what Eastern philosophy calls the Atman. And you and I are extensions of that greater self. We are individualizations of that greater self. You can call it the Atman, you can call it the Oversoul, you can call it God, you can call it the Creator. Whatever you want to call it, this is the being that is the source of all life. It is the ultimate state of awareness, self-awareness. And it has individualized itself as you and I, as our conscious selves. And our conscious selves are sent into this material world actually in order to be co-creators with God in this world. This is even expressed in the Old Testament, where there's the sentence that God said, "Let us make man in our own image and after our own likeness," or close to that. So you and I are created in the image and likeness of our source, of our Creator, which doesn't mean that God looks like a human being. It means that you and I have the ability of mind, the capacity of mind to actually co-create. I talk about this in my latest series of discourses, where I talk about our true role and how we can go beyond the traditional views of science and religion. I call it the ongoing revolution of consciousness. And what I say is that we are meant to be co-creators. And the reason why we can serve as co-creators is that we are extensions of God's being. This doesn't mean that we have the omnipresent awareness that the Creator has. We have a localized awareness. Your conscious self is seeing the world from a particular localized vantage point. You don't see the big picture. You can't step outside of the entire universe and see the universe from the outside as God can. You are seeing it from the inside. But nevertheless, that ability to be self-aware and to experience the world, you have that ability because your conscious self is an extension of the Creator's being. And that is why your conscious self has the ability to experience the Creator's being. You can experience God directly because your conscious self is an extension of God, and therefore it has the ability to go back to its source. This might be a completely new concept to you. It is certainly, if you were brought up in a Christian, traditional Christian background, it will be a new and revolutionary concept, because traditional Christianity portrays God as the remote being up in the sky that only Jesus could connect to. But as I argue in my talks about a revolutionary look at Jesus, Jesus had attained a state of consciousness where he had attained oneness with his Creator. He said, I and my Father are one. But Jesus came to demonstrate, to set an example for all of us that we can achieve that same state of consciousness, that same state of oneness with our source. And in order to do so, we have to go beyond what I call the duality consciousness, where we believe in the illusion of the separate self. We have to do what Jesus said when you remember Jesus said, he who seeks to save his life shall lose it, but he who is willing to lose his life for my sake shall find it. Well, the life he was talking about is that sense of identity as a separate self, as a separate being. Now, in order to understand that, you need to realize that you are not actually confined to this human being. Your conscious self came out of a spiritual being that exists in the spiritual realm. It is something that various spiritual teachings have called your I am presence, because again, it's a self-aware spiritual being. But your I am presence constantly resides in the spiritual realm, which means that your true individuality is anchored up there. It is actually what Jesus talked about when he talked about your treasure laid up in heaven. And he said that it cannot be corrupted. The meaning is that your I am presence is beyond the vibrations of the material universe. Nothing that happens on earth can affect who you really are. No mistake you have ever made can degrade who you really are, because it's beyond this world. So what you realize is that your I am presence has sent an extension of itself, your conscious self, into this world to abide in a physical body and express itself through that body and experience the world through that physical body. So the task of your conscious self is actually to build your sense of identity as a being in this material world. And that is precisely why so many people have come to believe that they are human beings, that they are limited, that they are sinners, or that they are evolved monkeys. Because your conscious self has the ability to accept or create any sense of identity it wants.